I'd like to welcome you all here today and thank you for joining us. Thank you for braving the Sandton traffic and the rain and the Rio Via and all of those things that got in the way of you getting here today. Ian doesn't need much introduction. He is the king of marketing and the king of client service. Ian, I have to tell you, I've been going to Sorbet for many, many years. I have a therapist, Zidel, who still today talks about you. She says, if you see Ian, tell him hello. She said, he taught me everything. He was personable, he was on the ground, and he was our friend. He taught us how to treat our guests. So you're in for a treat today. You're here to hear about marketing, client service, and Ian's story. Welcome to you all.
Thank you. So you all most probably know Ian through Sorbet. And Sorbet's was a hair-raising business.
10 out of 10.
10
out of 10.
And he's now moving into something else called Popsicle, which is about nails. And I'm sure with his history, he's going to nail that as well. So, Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Ian is really, you know, a lot of people that we talk about them and we say they're a serial entrepreneur. But Ian is really a serial entrepreneur. He founded Sorbet, he founded Hatch Institute, and now, as I said, he's now going into business with his wife on Popsicle, and he's going to take us through all the lessons that he's learned along the way and what he wants to share with us. If you remember Sorbet, or you might have heard the previous talks, started with about 6 stores, grew to over 200 stores with thousands of employees. And I think it was Helene was sharing with me a story earlier today that she went to a Sorbet and the lady working there said, you made a huge difference to her life. And when you said, oh, by working at Sorbet, I said, no, Ian himself. Because he gets involved and he really cares about people. And hopefully that'll come through the book as we go along with that. When we say with the book, Ian has written, you know, they say people have a book in them. Everyone's got a book in them. Ian might still have another book in him, but he's got 4 that are out. So his first book, he wrote in 2014 called Get That Feeling. And then the next one was specifically about Sorbet, Soul of Sorbet. And I think you will share the lessons. The soul is what I just mentioned, that story about connecting with people. And connecting with people is around the culture. And he created his next book, which came out in 2021 called Cultureneering. It's the basis of every business. There's a culture, and you either do it on purpose and you know what you're trying to do, or it creates its own culture. And then the last one that came out in 2024 was The Human Bridge, and it's about racial healing in South Africa. We've got a very checkered past, and it's about healing that past consciously. And I often, you know, I do the Orchard Business Show, and I always ask the people the question, where did this entrepreneurial flair come from? Did you learn it from somewhere? And in Ian's case, it was from his dad, Kenny, who was a founding director of Russell Stores. And I think just learning from that and then building on that. And that goes back to what actually Ort does, is give you a mentor. If you're not born with a Kenny in your life, you can find a Kenny at Ort who can help you with your businesses. Through the interviews with Ian, what I found is he says success isn't a straight line. We think that you do something and then you're successful. You go through so many different challenges, and it's about going through that challenge. I actually saw an image the other day of somebody pushing a boulder up a hill. And right at the top, it gets the hardest. But if you've managed to get that boulder just over the top, then it's easy going down. And I sometimes look at my own life and my own business experience and think, how many times was I about to get that boulder over the top, and then I thought, no, this is too difficult. And it's hopefully we'll learn at what stage do you persevere and at what stage do you give up. Ian believes in taking risks, and learning through that failure. So take the risks, learn the lessons, and then you become better after that. And then build something meaningful. So it needs to come from the inside out. So today we're not just talking about business, we're talking about a mindset. And one of the key lessons from building Sorbet that Ian mentioned in the last talk was when he set it up, he thought that he was going to hire strong business-minded people and then train them for the business industry. You would often think maybe I should hire beauty therapists and teach them business, but he found it worked the other way around. If you understand business, then you can choose what business you want to do. So Ian, thank you for being with us. And I want to start off with the books. And Ian just brought the 4 books. They're lying over there. And the one on the top says, Get That Feeling. I said to Ian, when I saw that, I said, normally when I get that feeling, I get into trouble. So hopefully that won't happen today.
He's gone.
If we can start off, and we'll go through each book in sequence.
Yes.
You wrote the book for a reason.
Yeah.
Well, what were you trying to teach specifically with that book? And then we'll go through each of the other books. How were those lessons different from Get That Feeling?
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invite, and nice to see you all here today. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much, Dave. So the first book is really about my entrepreneurial journey, and it starts right at the beginning. And some of the businesses that I started and ran before Sorbet were the ones where really most of my sort of ideas and thoughts around culture and service were formulated. And so by the time I got to Sorbet, I already had a lot of it taking place. So I'm going to start right at the beginning, if I may. I was born in Vanderbilt Park. And people say to me, why were you born there? Because I wanted to be close to my mother. She happened to be there at the time. And I was told that's where the milk was. So I moved down there to be born, and then lived there for a couple of years. And my father brought us to Johannesburg. As Dave said, he was one of the founding directors of Russell Furnishers. And also, interestingly, the guy who started Joshua Door in South Africa. And so he started Joshua Door. So I really had an entrepreneur in my family. And my older brothers are also very entrepreneurial. So you might remember the uncle in the furniture business. Yeah, that's right. Well, I had a father in the furniture business. Anyway, so we moved to Joburg. I went to King David School. It's a bit of a rebel there. And then I went to university, dropped out quite successfully in my second year, and then became a singer. And then one day, it all started when my older brother, who's about 10 years older than me, was 10 at the time, he came back from the States one day, and he said, I've just seen this huge business in America called Kmart. Huge, big departmental discount stores. He says, we have to open one of those in South Africa. And I said, well, which one of us is we? And he was a CA and very clever and very successful. And I was this university dropout that knew nothing. And he said, no, you got to open it. Me, I was 22 years old. So if you work that out, in 1976, it's 50 years now ago that I started something. And he said, no, you're going to open it and we're going to aim it at the black market. I wasn't even sure what that was. I thought that was about it. This is diamond buying. Didn't even know what that meant. I knew nothing about retailing, nothing about pricing and discounting, and certainly nothing about the black market. I lived a very, very protected life in the suburbs, in the leafy suburbs of Burnhaven, and I knew nothing about anything. So what did I say? As most naive, young, stupid 22-year-old boys would say, I said, sure, let's do this. Sounds like fun. Let's open Kmart. And a couple of fundamental errors in the beginning. Firstly, we just used their name. It was a big mistake. Because I didn't know anything about trademarks and stuff. What is that? Anyway, so we just opened that. And to make matters about 10 times worse, we used their logo as well. So off we went, armed with Kmart's logo, and we opened our first store in Johannesburg. We planned to open it in 1976 in June. But as we know, June 1976, something else was going on in South Africa. It was the Soweto uprisings, and of course we couldn't open at that stage because there was a lot of drama and chaos, violence, bloodshed. Wasn't a good time to open the store. So we planned to open it in July. And my brother said to me, why don't we just advertise some really good prices in the local black newspaper so we can get some people in when we open the doors? So I didn't know how much to cut the prices. So I just cut the shit out of everything completely. I knew nothing about gross profit or how to make money. So I said, okay, he wants low prices, I'll give him low prices. And half the country arrived when they saw, they couldn't believe the prices that they saw. So they came really in very large numbers, so much so that there was a big drama in the center of Joburg, and the police arrived thinking there was another uprising in the middle of town. It took us a few hours to get there, to get some kind of order, and people standing in queues right around the block. It went around the block, believe it or not, for 3 days. And it was chaos. I mean, I won't even tell you how much chaos it was. We don't have enough time. But still to this day, I have no idea how much cash we took and how much went into the bank and how much disappeared into wherever, because we were completely overwhelmed. And of course, I was the only white person there, because all the staff were black and all the customers were black, and I was literally thrown into the deep end. And we were really struggling. And so what happened was, I decided that I needed a mentor. Talk about mentors. And my mentor was slightly older than me. He was about 25. His name was Ralph Mamela. And I asked him if he could help me to learn how to communicate with black people, because I had obviously zero credibility as a leader. I was too young, too white, and too stupid. So I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, please, can you help me with the communication? And he said, sure, I'll try. And he did, and he tried. But at the time, there were these consumer boycotts. Some of us will remember the consumer boycotts back in the late 70s and 80s, where black people were boycotting white-owned businesses. And one of the staff runs into me one day and says, you know what? One of our own people is out in the streets handing out pamphlets promoting a boycott of our own store. I've stopped. And who was it? Ralph. My mentor. I mean, I was completely shattered by that. And I was really shattered. And I called him in. And in those days, you could find people at will. There was no labor relations, no all that stuff. Okay. So I knew I was going to fire him. He knew he was going to be fired. And I dumped on him, and I went on and on and on. And eventually, after I'd finished screaming at him, he said, can I say a few words, please? Sure. He said, I enjoy working here and thanks for the job, but my problem is not in the workplace. He said, my problem is outside. Okay? I'm living in this country as a black person, and every single day on my way into work or on the way home, I'm being harassed by the police. Whether or not it's for some ridiculous apartheid law or if they just want to give me a hard time, and sometimes I end up in prison for no good reason. He says, we are suffering here. We are truly, truly suffering. And you don't understand. And you will never understand. But you've never experienced what we go through. And then he said to me, you know what? Just before I go, my parting words, he said, for me, I'm not sure this is something shaking. Yeah, what is me?
It's the tremble of your heart, yeah.
Our hearts. So he said, my parting words are freedom first and work second. Freedom first. I'm trying to digest that. Freedom first, work second. What does that mean? It says we need to be free. I can't focus on my job when I'm living in a country like this. thought, wow, the eyes opened. I said, okay, I'm not going to fire you. You're going to become a proper mentor, not half a mentor like you were before. And you're going to teach me every single thing you know about South African politics so that I can understand what's happening out there and understand why the socio-political environment is impacting so heavily on my staff and on my productivity and everything else that goes on in the business. And he said, sure, I'll be your mentor on one condition, that you come with me into Soweto. Now, in those days, you didn't see any big signs outside Soweto saying, whites welcome. There was nobody was going into the townships at that time. So I said, will you look after me? And he said, sure, I'll look after you. Don't worry, it'll be fine. And off we went. And I spent a lot of time with him in Soweto. And took me to his home, met his family, I met his friends. We went to ship-ins together. And he took me to the place where Hector Peterson was killed by the police on June 16. And my eyes really started to open. And I realized, man, there's another country in our country, which I've never seen before. I had no idea that it even existed, never mind what was going on here. And so I learned some big, big lessons. And that's really where my racial healing and social justice journey started from there on. And then it went from there. So that was my first experience as an entrepreneur. And it just made me, or helped me to change my leadership style. To one of the old sort of 5-point plan, that you're in charge and people have to do what you tell them to do, to becoming a servant leader. I didn't know about servant leadership at the time, but the principles I started to practice about serving the people who are serving the people. And if you want to be able to get people to be productive at the end of the day and to deliver great service, you had to understand them and you had to build a culture that accommodated people and gave them a sense of belonging. And so that they felt trusted and respected, and they felt that their contributions were valued and that their voices were heard and they were treated with dignity and respect and so on and so forth. That was the beginning of my leadership journey to start.
So one of the big lessons with entrepreneurship is you can hear the question, but answer whatever you want. And I said, let's start with the first book, and he started with the last book.
No, that is the first.
Oh, is that the first
That
book?
is the first.
Because you come right round to the human bridge.
Yes, yeah, it comes at the end.
Okay.
But it started there.
So get that feeling, is that around this whole experience?
That's my whole life story, basically. Up to 2014, when we have been running Sorbet for about 8-9 years. But everything up to there.
Up to then.
And there was other stuff. There was music, the music business. I started a record company. We sold and produced music from some of the key expatriate musicians. The black people will know who I'm talking about now, the whites won't have a clue. But Letambulu, Kaifa Semenya, Huma Sikela, the Soul Brothers, and so on and so forth. I had the record company for about 7 years after my brother came on, went on to music, went into international sale of records. We distributed Whitney Houston, a number of other international. So it was a great period there, 7 years. And then because I was so exposed to all the race stuff throughout my journey, I then started to do a race relations consultancy or labeling. And I tried to go out there and sell myself as a race relations consultant. Can you imagine that wasn't the easiest thing to do, because I wanted to work in public companies, teach them how to manage racism in the workplace. So I tried to go there, but they kicked me out. Basically, just laughed me out of the office. So I didn't know what to do, and I was so determined because I could see what a difference it made when you addressed racism in the workplace, how it impacted on productivity. So I said, no, I was determined to go. And eventually I came up with an idea. I started what we call industrial theatre. So industrial theatre is when you create plays of things that happen in the workplace. So this was a play about racism in the workplace. One of the actors at the time, funny enough, people from Cape Town might know, or ever go to Cape Town and listen to the radio, there's a guy called John Mathan on radio in Cape Town, 567 talk radio. He's been there for years. He was the actor in our play back in 1991. And so this play took off, and we were getting into all of the majors. Nedbank showed that play 40 times around the country. They just loved it because it was a way to address racism, but in a way that was kind of humorous and palatable, rather than the awkwardness that race was bringing up at that time. And so it was very successful, and then I was able to get in and consult, and I did that for 7 years to companies like Anglo-American, London Mining, Nedbank, and a number of other businesses. Very, very interesting and challenging time, but highly stimulating, highly rewarding, because we were challenging the status quo in a big way. And not many people were doing what we were doing at that time. And then I went back to the retailing business. My brother said, hey, listen, this business is growing now. We need to build it and sell it. So I went back there. At that stage, we were called Supermart because the Americans eventually clicked on to the use of their name in South Africa that they had never given any permission for. So they sent out an army of lawyers. Really, and literally a whole group of lawyers came out. We thought we had a case because we had been trading as Kmart for 12 years at that stage. 12 years. But they came and they were so well organized and prepared that they blew us out the water. We had to change our name to Supermart. Changed to Supermart. And then I went back there and we built Supermart. And there at Supermart, a lot of my work was developed the second time around. Because what we were doing, because at that stage I understood all the political stuff and the social, we employed the leader of ASAPO at Supermart. Yeah. He was in prison for 6 months, and he came out of prison, and one of my staff who was involved in the Black Consciousness movement said, listen, this guy looking for a job. So I said, who is he? He said, he's the leader of ASAPO. I said, I have a CV. I said, yeah, okay, bring him. So the leader of the ZAPO was our dispatch manager during the day. And he thought about overthrowing the government in the evenings. That was in Moonlight John. And so we had lots of people like that. And of course, I was just learning more about politics about race. I never became an active political activist, whatever you call it. But I used all the stuff that I learned and was learning in the way that I ran my business. All of that racial stuff and the healing and everything else. And so we did some interesting work there. And instead of having training sessions at Supermart on how to sell more product, in 1989, just before that big election, 1989, we were talking about the ANC Freedom Charter. We were talking about the PAC manifesto and all of those type of things. Those were our discussions and planning what was to come in the future South Africa. That was our big focus. The rest of it was incidental because I knew if we could get a culture where everybody truly felt that they belonged in this place, where very few South Africans could say that in other companies, particularly Black people could say they truly felt a sense of belonging. Companies like educators and all of those guys at the time, that we could build a business that could deliver superior service. That's exactly what happened. And that business built so well that we sold it to Edcom. And they called it Jetmart. So I don't know if you know Jetmart, you may have heard of the Jetmart business. So Jetmart was Supermart, which was Kmart, which we started in July 1976. So that's the first chapter up until 2003.
So if I can ask you, just running businesses, it's very important to still make a profit.
Yes.
And you said you weren't sure about the profitability and even the industrial theatre. Did you make money from that? How did you keep going? How did you ensure that you're doing fantastic work from a racial point of view
Yes.
and getting people together, but you still within that have to make money?
Yes.
How did the money side fit into this?
Okay, so that's a very good question because I often get asked, how does culture reflect on the bottom line? And my response to that is culture is the bottom line. If you don't have a culture, you can forget about the bottom. It's never going to happen. Certainly not to your expectations. So the culture delivers the bottom line. Whether or not we could have made more money is another question altogether. But we certainly made enough to survive and to grow and to build. So obviously I started to learn about business as I went along. But I was never driven by the money. Because I don't believe, and I still don't believe to this day, in what I do with teaching and coaching, is that the purpose of business is never about making money. Can't be. Yeah. The purpose of business is only about having an impact on the people that you serve. Customers. That's all. That's why we go into business, not because we want to make lots of money. As soon as we go into business to make money, we go downhill and we turn our backs on our customers because we're so busy focused on trying to squeeze profit out of this and cut costs there where they're not necessary and to calm down and tone down on the quality of your service because it costs too much money to train people. And of course, you just go backwards very quickly. So I learned perhaps the most important lesson of my entire business life was that the purpose of work is to serve, not to make money. Good news is, if you serve well, if you provide exceptional service, money will always follow. Always. But if you don't serve well, then the money is not going to follow. And then you're in trouble.
And so you took that lesson of wanting to serve, and then you moved into your next venture and eventually your next book, which was
Yes.
Sorbet.
Yes.
So if you want to talk us through the second book, the lessons and why you started it and how you started.
So after selling Supermart to Edcon, I was unemployed for about 6 months and looking for something to do. And all I had at the time was a culture framework. That was the one thing that I had developed. So I had my little culture framework under my arm. All I needed was a business in which to actually practice it. That was my plan. I wanted to find a business that I could prove that I could start something from scratch and build it around culture. That particular culture framework, which I call Cultureneering. And so I was lying on a massage table one day, because before, I must tell you, I knew nothing about beauty. But I was saying nothing. I mean, look. Nothing. And so, I mean, before all of this, I thought a Brazilian was a person who lived in Brazil. And that the Hollywood was a place that made movies. I couldn't believe some of the things that we did. Like waxing. It shook me. I mean, we had a thing called a 3/4 leg wax. In that another 3/4 leg. It still bothers me today as to which quarter they left out.
The bald quarter.
I was always trying to picture where was the hairy patch? Was it at the bottom of the leg or the top of the leg?
You say that you've never had a 3/4 leg.
No, definitely.
I feel like this is
No.
the
I
social
had an
media.
earwax once and I'm still in recovery. So I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so I learned about that, and then I was having a massage one day, actually, with a beauty therapist that had previously worked at Dermalogica. And it was a legitimate massage. Just as you wondered, as you get that feeling. And the woman said to me, "Why don't you look at the beauty industry?" I said, "What?" I mean, that was so far removed from my world, beauty. She said, "No, there's a gap in the market." And I said, "Well, is there a market in the gap?" She said, "Yes." She said, "Yes, nobody has ever been able to build a national chain of beauty salons." She doesn't know why. but no one's been able to do that. At the time, the only one who had tried to build something meaningful was Dream Nails, and that was a nail business. And I was interested more in the whole beauty salon environment, and that caught my attention. But okay, there lies a challenge. Why has no one been able to build a national chain of beauty salons? And nobody could tell me. No one could tell me. So I thought, okay, well, here we go. We're going to go and find out. So I bought a couple of existing beauty salons and just to learn the business, and then rebranded them, and we launched it in 2005 with six stores. And so the first thing, of course, was to take my culture framework and then to start to develop it. So every single person that ever joined Sorbet from that day, 1st of July 2005, until I left 2019, had to come through my induction training. So my induction training was all about culture. I didn't talk at all about business, about targets, about money, about cost savings, about anything. I just spoke about culture.
So it was with you yourself.
I did it myself. Every single 3,500 people in Sorbet have been through my induction training for a full day, and then come for a refresher every 12 months. Yeah, because that's how important I felt it was. I had to do it myself. And that's why these people know me, because I was involved there with them, literally, in quite a big way. So yeah, and it started from there. And of course, our culture, we call it the Soul of Sorbet. That's the title of the book. And it was the thing that happened there that really got me excited about culture in Sorbet and made me write the book was a particular incident, a story. Some of you might know a lady who's passed away by the name of Bev Zidel. Some of you might know Bev Zidel? No. So Bev was a very, very keen fan of Sorbet, and she used to go to the Oaklands branch every 2 weeks to have her nails done. And she went to one particular nail technician whose name was Kenzie. And but unfortunately, around about that time, she was diagnosed with a melanoma, a cancer melanoma behind her eye. She lost one eye, and then she went for the chemo and she did all the treatments. Then after a while, she was in remission. Everything was fine. And then one day she went for her 6-monthly checkup, and the doctor saw something on the scans that wasn't happy about. He said, "You've got to come back for a full PET scan. We need to check this out." And of course, she got a hell of a fright, and she thought, "Oh, cancer's come back again." So the first place she went to is to the nail bar, the Sorbet nail bar. She's telling Kenzie there that she's got this thing again, that she's telling the whole story, and she's petrified that it's coming back. Kenzie does something a bit strange or a bit unique that you wouldn't normally see in the beauty salon. She stops all the other therapists and nail technicians who are doing their work with their clients. When she came out of that scan, she saw her husband. She said, "Rob, do me a favor. Just go past Sorbet in Oakland. Go in there, ask for Kenzie, find her, and tell her that Bev's okay. She doesn't need to worry anymore." And that was before she told her sister. And that's what made me write that book.
Wow.
Because the relationships that were happening between the beauty therapists and the nail technicians and our guests, we call them guests, was so profound that I thought I had to tell the stories. And so then I asked the rest of the stores, please send in your stories about these relationships. And that's what that whole book is about.
So is that book a whole series of stories?
Of stories and how we created that culture at Sorbet.
So it's very interesting because I heard people share their stories with when they go have their haircuts and the question was, why would you share it with somebody who's a stranger, really? And it's because we protect ourselves, and this is the one person who we let in to our inner circle. They're physically touching us, and therefore you feel closer to them. And we were talking just beforehand that the therapists they proper therapists. They're like, you get into the psychology of it. So that's an amazing story. What can you share one or two other stories like that with us?
Yeah, there was one particular one with, again, there was a woman who had breast cancer, and she had a double mastectomy, and she couldn't use her arms to dry her hair. It was too painful. And so she came to Sorbet, one of the Sorbet dry bars, it's the hair bar. And she came every day and they did her hair for her. And she wrote us an email that moved me to tears. It was just unbelievable how she described the love that she felt from these people and how they got her through that incredibly difficult period of her life. Yeah, and many more stories, I think.
So when you were training them, did you train them to be able to have the freedom to do this?
Yes, we had to be a bit careful because we didn't want them to become psychologists. because otherwise they start giving advice. It's one thing to listen, it's another thing giving advice. Like, often a woman will come in and she'll complain about her husband and how bad he is and how terrible he is and beat her up. And the therapist was listening to this, but she's not allowed to say, well, I think you should leave him there.
But you should.
And one of them did say that. And the next day,
The husband.
the husband came because the woman went back and said, even my therapist said I should. And it wasn't funny because he came in and he dragged her out physically. He dragged her out of the store and threatened to put her in the boot of his car and drive her away. Yeah, and fortunately, the security at the shopping center stopped him. But that's how bad it can be. You've got to be very, very careful to start giving advice like that. So we make them good listeners, and show empathy and concern, and then just nice sort of casual conversation. But we can't allow them to be giving psychological advice because they're not trained.
Yeah, and on that point, just from our social environment, you would find that a lady who has this beauty therapist might move from one branch to the other, and that woman would go with the therapist to the other branch.
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, they would follow them all over the country.
So that compounds your point,
Yeah.
how that personal relationship.
It's remarkable.
It's also very compounding.
So you took the soul story, which is really
Yeah.
these stories, and then you created this next book, which you called Cultureneering.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very clever design because it looks like a fingerprint, but it's actually a person's face with it in there. Did you take all these lessons and is this like a manual on how to do it? Okay. And so what would you say from here if I wanted like a 2-minute summary of this? What would that be?
Okay. So the definition of cultureneering is how to build a strong culture in a diverse workforce that lays the platform for obsessive customer service. So it's actually quite
Say that again.
okay. How to build a strong culture
Strong culture.
in a diverse workforce, and that's a very important point. In a diverse workforce that lays the platform for obsessive customer service. In other words, a very, very strong link between culture and service. That is the key. That's what the whole thing is. And how to build a culture that will deliver great service. If you go into a normal company and you ask people, and why do you come to work? Most of them will say, I come to make money. And then you kind of wonder, why are they not motivated? Why are they not inspired? Why are they not serving better? Why are they not more productive? Why? And then I asked them, why should they? What is going to inspire them to go out there and do their best if they're not happy in their working environment? So if you don't get the working environment right first, forget about customer service. You're not going to get it. The customer experience, one of the lessons, the customer experience will never be better than the employee experience. Never. Customer experience will never be better than the employee experience. If the employees are not feeling good about themselves, feeling that sense of belonging I spoke about, then you can be pretty sure the customers are not going to be very happy with the service. So that's one of the main philosophies there. And then, of course, it's the attitude also. It's not just the service. You don't come to serve. That's where the servant leadership comes in, because we are serving the people who are serving the people. That's what servant leadership means. Right? So everybody comes to serve. But it's fine to be able to serve. So like in the beauty industry, every single nail technician or beauty therapist that works in a beauty salon should be trained 100%. They should know exactly how to do their job. Right? They've been trained, they know everything. So that's one element of the service, is the technical skill that you have. But the bigger part of it for me is the attitude with which you deliver that service. The attitude is not right, then the service will be a failure, despite the technical ability. So if you have, like for example, you go into a supermarket, could be any of them, maybe Pick and Pay or whichever one doesn't agree on that point. And sometimes you walk in and you see behind the tills, the faces are a little bit clumsy, to say the least. And it bothers me. So I go and I ask him, what's wrong? So, what do you mean? Is everything okay? Are you happy? Of course I'm happy, can't you see? So I say, well, if you're happy, tell your face. If you're happy, tell your face. Hi, yes.
So, I mean, you're somewhat explained it, but maybe in a bit more detail. How do you inspire your workforce, which has so many different upbringings, priorities in their life, age groups?
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a boiling pot of diversity. That's what I call it. It's all this.
So how do you inspire them?
And it's about making people feel a sense of belonging. So accepting and respecting people who are different to you. That's number one. We don't do that. South Africa's got a shocking reputation for accepting people that are different to them. We're not good. We've got a 350-year history, which is beyond belief in terms of racism and the concept of superiority, what I call the hierarchy of human value, that where some groups are considered more valuable than others. And that was built into the apartheid system. So we're dealing with that. I'm touching on the last part. We're dealing with that. So in terms of cultureneering, we need to get people to understand how we got ourselves into this mess in the first place. And people say, no, but we shouldn't be talking about apartheid anymore. We're 30 years down the line. We should put it behind us. And I say, you can't put it behind you because we haven't addressed the problems here. If you think racism is gone in South Africa because we have a new government, forget about it. It's just as bad, if not worse, in some cases than it was before. So we have to deal with it. And we spend a lot of time getting people to talk to each other and understand each other so that we can then learn from each other. And we have these different perceptions. If you don't know someone's history and their past lived experience, you'll never understand why they behave the way they do. Never. Never. You'll just forget about it. So you get people like white people saying at the moment things like, I'm not a racist. I don't see color at all. No color. I treat everybody the same. And then the person who's listening to that, a person of color, says, what do you mean? You don't see my color. My whole life has been determined by my color. And you're telling me you don't even see it? That is offensive. It means you completely don't understand my life experience. And what I've been through, and you're judging me based on your life experience, is very, very, very different. So please don't tell me you don't see color, unless you've got an eyesight problem. Okay. I mean, so these are some of the things that we have to deal with in the workplace. And this is the work that I'm doing in all these companies, the Hatch Institute at the moment. Investec, for example, is running a whole racial healing process called the Human Bridge Workshop through their leadership at the moment, where we're having these very courageous conversations and helping people to understand how they can build a culture in a workplace that is so diverse. Yeah, and I could go on for hours.
So if we go back to you hiring somebody for Sorbet
Yes.
and you want to give them purpose to their job.
Yeah.
What do you look for? Are there people who come and say, I want to work here, and you say, sorry, you're not for us? Or can you help everybody to find purpose in what they do?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very interesting point because it's difficult to get that right every time. We hire for culture and then we train for skill. Okay. So in other words, we hire for attitude. You can tell some people have just got long faces. You know, like the horse that walked into the barn and the barman said, why the long face? You know, it's that kind of stuff. You got long faces, you say, thank you very much. Same with franchisees. If you don't show enthusiasm and passion for the brand, then you're not going to be successful again. So we try and hire for attitude and train for skill. That's basically what we do. Yes.
So can I ask you, when you say hire for attitude, would that include culture fit and so on? So do you have any processes that outline whether somebody is actually a good fit for that culture? Then are there any like secret hacks?
We don't do any psychometric testing, like anything like that. It's about feel, and to say, I mean, if we get 6 out of 10 right, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
I think. Because it's very, very difficult in an interview, even in the sequence of interviews, to be able to judge how this person is going to behave in the, under the pressure of the workplace. So I think you kind of try your best and you see how many you can get right. But that's why at the induction training, we spend so much time on this, on attitude. That's what it is. Because you can have a great service and your nails will look good, but if you did it without a good attitude, then it's half a job. And what you also have to do is you have to get people to believe. And you were saying earlier on about somebody saying, I want to be a nail technician. Was it a daughter or somebody? Right? Okay. And you said, well, aim higher.
Do lashes.
Yeah, do lashes and eyebrows as well. So basically, we work on getting people to start believing in the importance of what they do. So most people will say, you know what, I'm only a nail technician. What do you do? I'm only. It's a word. I always put only. What does only mean? Only means I'm not really great. I'm kind of low down on the scale. And I'm aspiring to be up there, but for now, I'm only a nail technician. In other words, I couldn't be a pastor, I couldn't be a doctor, I couldn't be whatever. And I say, what do you mean only? I say, what do you do every day? No, I do 6 to 8 sets of nails every day. And how do you make those people feel? So no, generally they feel quite good when they leave. And you're telling me that's not important? You are impacting on that person's life 6 to 8 people a day. That's more than most people will ever get an opportunity. This is not even a job, it's a privilege to do what you do. It's powerful. You're impacting on people's lives. That was our purpose. You're making people feel good. I mean, if you're working in the bank or in the supermarket, you're not making people feel good. In the beginning of Sorbet, I didn't pay much attention to the numbers. I was much more focused on the brand building and the culture. And obviously that cost us in the end because we were always 6 months behind on our accounts and we never knew from one day to the next if we were making money or not. Quite frankly, at the time, I didn't care. I said, that will come if we ever get this brand right. Build the brand. And I know that's a bit of a naive approach. And I probably wouldn't do that again. Now, at Popsicle, we certainly have to get our figures out every month, but whatever. But at the time, I was so focused on culture and brand building, but I wasn't worried about the money. And it's coming back to haunt us a little bit like when we sold our business to Brian Joffe. Our figures weren't looking that great, but it is what it is. So, yeah, I don't know. You got to find the balance there. It's not easy.
I just want to take you back now for the cultureneering. Is there anything else you want to add on that before we get to your last one?
Yeah, I think in terms of cultureneering, you also have, I believe every business in South Africa has an obligation to uplift the country. And this is now a higher purpose. Okay, because we come out of a country that is devastated by our past. And we have to do whatever we can to help uplift. And so the cultureneering process helps us with that. It helps us to get people to feel part of the system and to feel that sense of belonging and that everybody is treated fairly and with dignity. And basically what happened, like for example, with Sorbet, a true example here, is when I started in 2004, I was starting to prepare for the Sorbet business, and I was buying up those independent salons and got an invitation from Dermalogica to come to one of their launches. And I had just started, and I was 51 when I started Sorbet. And I went in there, I was the only guy there person, and I was old. And everyone looked at me very suspicious. They were not comfortable with this old guy hanging around looking suspicious. I think maybe they thought I was a trafficker. I don't know, but they gave me a very wide berth. Nobody came near me. And what I noticed was that all the people were female, that was understandable, but they were all white. The industry at the time was white. And it was mainly skincare therapists we're talking about, not so much nail technicians. That was different. But the skincare therapists were all predominantly white. And so I was uncomfortable. I'd spent my whole life working with black people. Now here I am confronted by this white industry. So I just thought to myself, you know what? We'll change that. We are going to change that. And if you ask me what am I most proud about in terms of the success of Sorbet, is that when I left, that 95% of our skincare therapists were black. That is cultureneering in practice.
So this leads to the next book, which you've basically spoken about.
Yes.
Why then create the human bridge? And I think all of it comes through. Is it about that you wanted a separate book just on that issue?
Okay, so it was a topic that I had been involved with right from the beginning, as you know, from the Kmart days, learning and learning great. And then one day I'm sitting in a conference which was held by News 24. I think they've got another one coming up soon, about 3 years ago. And I'm sitting here and they're talking about the future of South Africa. This was before the elections of, what is it, 2020? Okay. And I'm listening and they got a lot of very important people there, and they got politicians and the opposing politicians are talking about elections, they're talking about crime, they're talking about the weather, climate, and I'm waiting to hear about race. Who talks about the future of South Africa and doesn't talk about race? And how can you do that? And nothing, not a word came out there. And I was completely surprised and shaken up a bit about that. How have we allowed that, the most critical problem that South Africa faces, to disappear off the radar? I was shocked. I couldn't believe it.
I just want to sum up some of it before we get to some of the questions.
What I'm hearing from you is impact on the people that you serve. So you need to have an impact on them. The purpose of work is not to make money. The purpose of work is to serve and be obsessive about your customer. It's amazing to see somebody go through so many different businesses, but they, what we call the golden thread, goes through all of it. And making people feel good and uplifting the country, I think it's incredible. So I want to thank you for your input, and now I want to get everyone else's input with your questions. And I want to hand it over to you as the first one, because I stopped you when you were going to ask earlier. Thank you.
And maybe we can just remind them that the best questions will each earn a book, be a prize given.
Ian's handing out a book to each person who has the best question.
Get the 4 best questions.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. It's a pleasure to come and see you in person.
I'm one of the franchisees for Sophie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Which book do you want?
I get the feeling one, so I'll bank on the other ones. But I just wanted to ask, at that time, it was so difficult, I would imagine, for you to introduce this 7 leadership style. Also from the Black people outside, I would imagine that it was also confusing for them. Who's this guy? What are the leaderships? But I wanted to just understand from your side, what were the lessons learned? And were there ever moments where you think you overdid it? What were the boundaries, critical boundaries that you put in place so that people don't confuse your 7 leadership style with someone who's kind of taking advantage of?
Yeah. A very good question. Thank you. So did you attend my induction training?
No.
And you came after me.
Yes.
So servant leadership is really about understanding that the old days of the power-based leadership of God are behind us. Put them to rest. They're part of our history, not our future. We don't do that. Okay, it's a different thing. We have to earn we call it earning the moral authority to lead. To earn the moral authority to lead. There's a number of different things that you have to do in order to do that. So in other words, you earn the right to lead. You're not given the right because of the position of power that you hold. Sitting up in the hierarchies and the structures, right? You have to earn that right. Because you're the boss or the franchisee, for example, doesn't give you the right to earn that authority, as it were. So basically, there's a number of different things. I won't go through all of them, but there's a couple of things like create a place of safety in which people feel free to speak without fear. One of the key ones in South African company, right? Show a genuine concern for the well-being of people. Show a true commitment to their growth and development. Treat people the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. You know that old saying, that's a wonderful saying, I don't know where it came from. Treat people the way you would like to be treated. Yeah. That's bullshit. Treat people the way they want to be treated. I mean, where does that come from? I don't even write that thing. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so it's crazy. So all of these things are how you earn the moral authority to lead. And the reason why some people get confused about servant leadership is they don't understand how you can be a servant and a leader at the same time. Right? But servant leadership is not about poor discipline or weak management. It's about serving the people who are serving the people, right? And so if the people are breaking the rules, the discipline is firm. Servant leader is not soft. It's just nurturing. It nurtures rather than the top-down, heavy-handed type of leadership style. I don't know if that helps.
Can I add a little bit to that?
Yes,
I think
sure.
that also when you have the leadership style that serves your people, everyone becomes immersed in that. And what happens is it creates this team culture where if somebody steps out of that in any kind of disrespectful way, everyone holds them accountable. And it's not about whistleblowing or anything like that. It's just an expectation of how we behave, and everyone expects everyone to do the same thing.
Point, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms
In
of culture, as you're referring to, I think where South Africa has been blessed is the ability of our sport, my rugby and cricket point of view, which you see in the stadiums. How would you allude to that, and how can that be used maybe in the business context?
Yes, I mean that is such a perfect example. I've got a whole chapter on Rasmussen in the human breed book.
Yeah.
That is the absolute perfect example of what we should be doing in everything. Is creating that environment, that culture in that team. It's something special that has created the ability to deliver great results. And we should be doing that in every business, creating that environment which will deliver great service to our customers. Thanks, John.
And there's one here and then that's right.
Okay. I was going to cut to Larry quickly. Yeah.
Okay, I love your stories, yeah.
Thank you.
And then, what are you most excited about your new venture, possibly? What are the things what are you most excited about?
Okay,
And then I've got to say,
yeah, it's really, I mean, people say, What on earth made you think you should go back into such a saturated market? One person said, "Can you remember the exact moment you lost your mind?" So I think, Larry, the answer to that is, if you're going to go into a saturated market, you better be different and you better be better.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So I think just the opportunity to do something differently, try and do it better. You can never always be better, but at least try to be better. Try to deliver the service better. Try to come up with new ideas and innovative ideas. And so, if you look at the popsicle store, I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen one.
It's different.
Yeah, it is. I love it.
It's very, very different. So that's really what excites me about it.
Okay.
It's just doing something different. The same as we did with Sorbet. We did something different.
Yeah, it's not that uniqueness.
Yeah.
And then the second part. Yeah, so you were so great at Sorbet, all about culture and everything. What have you actually improved from that, taking into popsicle? Which are one or two things that you even want to push even more?
I'd say it's quite difficult to say how much it's improved because it's quite similar in terms of the culture that we're trying to create. But obviously, we've learned a lot of lessons.
Yes.
I've learned a lot of lessons. Things I didn't do
Yeah,
at Sorbet, for example, coaching. I didn't do individual one-on-one coaching with franchisees, which was a huge missed opportunity.
Yes.
I'm doing that now.
Okay.
Okay, so every franchisee will be coached by us.
Okay.
And those kind of things.
That's a big one.
Huge.
Thank you.
It's a good question again.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Morning, how are you guys?
Morning, how's it?
How are you?
Fine, thanks, and you?
My name is Dr. J. Mukibi. I'm the CEO and founder of Beyond Reach Private Clinic. So Beyond Reach Private Clinic is a healthcare brand that specializes in providing primary healthcare service to the marginalized communities. So in near future, I'll be looking into franchising my brand.
Right.
So what advice can you give to a person like me who's looking into franchising a brand? And what is it that you wish you knew before you go into franchising?
I wish I knew a lot more than I did, yeah. Yeah, but thank you for that, sir. I think the most important thing about franchising is you have to build a model that works before you start franchising. So in other words, financially works and works from all the different aspects of business. What happens is sometimes people build a new concept and they're so keen on franchising because that's an easier way to grow a business without having to put capital in, so that they rush it. And they want to start selling franchises long before the model is 100% great. So that's a bit of a bad decision from a business point of view, and it's also an unethical thing, because you can't sell a franchise on the belief that your system works if you haven't yet proven it yourself. That is the biggest lesson you can learn about franchise.
Can I just sort of add to that, having been associated and around the franchising industry for quite a few years, the other thing I sort of picked up is that something you've got to make peace with. That once you're a franchisor, you're no longer working on the business you started. So if you like treating patients or you like giving waxes, just reconcile yourself that you're actually going to become a mentor, an administrator.
Yes, 100%.
And that's going to be what you're going to spend your days doing.
Yeah.
If you like treating patients, don't franchise your business.
I think what drives me is the passion to make a difference. That's really what drives me. If you try and boil it down to one thing, trying to make a difference in the world, that's my higher purpose. And so in all of these different businesses, that is what I would have been focused on. That's what drives me. That's what gets me to go back into it, starting a new business at the tender age of 72.
Yeah.
It's hard. When you're starting something like that, it's hard. There's no easy way. And even with this popsicle thing, people think, okay, because I was successful at Sorbet, this is going to be like a slam dunk, And I always say to them, the only thing that you get from looking back at your past success is a stiff neck. That's,
Second rate is not easy on you.
there's no easy walk to freedom. So, and you've got to just start and go through it. I don't know any better way than trying to tell it. Sorry, I can't be of more help. I mean, I went to the UK. We didn't talk about that. Where I screwed up royally. Terrible. It was a disaster. Why? Because I thought, that the British people hadn't had a sorbet for about 4 million years. And so they were waiting for us. It was a terribly arrogant thing to do because I just assumed that what had worked here would work there. That's pure arrogance. That you've got this thing and you can just, you kind of take it over, dump it in the UK, and they're going to come flying in. So I can tell you they didn't come flying. And it was a disaster. We opened 5 stores and we had to close. It cost us a fortune. Why? Because I didn't do my homework. I just thought it would be so easy. Surely they want something that looks like sorbet because their salons are pretty average. But there's no easy way. Entrepreneurship is 4 things I'll say very quickly. First thing you have to have is intuition. That something is right, even though you don't have the evidence to prove. That's important. Intuition. Number 2 is you've got to have the courage. Right? You've got to have courage to go out and do things that no one else would do. It's like a pioneer. You're going out there. You don't have a map. You've got to create your own map. So there's a lot of courage involved. Number 3, you can't be afraid to fail. You're afraid to fail, you won't do half the things you need to do. Number 4, you've got to be in it for the long haul. So you have to believe that whatever business, you obviously got to do research and homework. So as a matter of interest, Sorbet took us 4.5 years to break even. 4.5 years. I had to put money into that business every month, pay the staff, 4.5 years. Because we wanted to franchise after 5 stores, and we couldn't find a franchisee until we had opened our 22nd store. And I had to pay for all of those stores. So it was a disaster from a financial point of view. But I never gave up because I truly believed that we were onto something. I just been fully.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks so much.